called Talk to Me. I don't
Hmm.
know when that was, maybe to 2011.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it really changed my life. It changed my life because I saw just such a wide range of artists and creators and tinkerers and people um, that were in the community, in this community, in this kind of creative coding, creative exploration community. I saw them on the walls of the MoMA. I saw them in the MoMA, and I've always had this vision of Paola Antonelli as almost like opening the back door of the MoMA for inviting people in and inviting in really interesting people, interesting conversations, interesting perspectives. And so I'm just really like delighted to have you with us and to hear from you today. And just for the audience, feel free to ask questions in the chat. At the end of the talk, I will um, be posing these to Paula as time permits. So I might ask a few questions myself, and then I'll go through the chat. So, while she's presenting, feel free to ask questions. But with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Paula.
Well, Zach, what a nice introduction. Thank you so much. And by the way, he's modest, so he hasn't told you, but he is in the collection actually with the iWriter, which is this amazing, amazing, amazing project from 2009. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but Zach is a pillar of this community of tinkers and thinkers that have deeply changed the way we live in our everyday life. So MoMA was founded in 1929, and its motto since the beginning, it used to be really a plaque at the entrance of the museum, was the art of our time, right? So with that in mind, and design also was always part, architecture and design were always part of the museum. So if we talk about architecture and design and our time, it's really about the way we live, and we always live with technology. I mean, technology is intrinsic to any act of making, but it's particularly central to architecture and design, which touches so deeply every single body and every single one. So MoMA, since the beginning, in other words, has been dealing with technology. And it goes without saying that now it is dealing with AI. And I really like the title of this series, Advancing Humans with AI, because there's a lot of fears and a lot also of excitement about AI. And I feel that as curators, the best that we can do is not to tell people what's good and what's bad, what's beautiful, what's ugly, what's right and what's wrong, but rather to to present examples, rich, interesting examples that are going to stimulate every single one's critical sense and healthy skepticism and antibodies, if possible. So I'm going to start a presentation that is going to talk about MoMA's relationship with technology and also artists' relationship with technology to then get to also AI. I'm gonna now share my screen and hopefully it'll all work perfectly. I suppose that right now you're seeing my screen. You are, right? Okay. Well,
Yes.
you can see well, perfect. So this is MoMA and AI, a case study. And I want to start with this image that is absolutely not AI. It's actually the artist Fujiko Nakaya, who is an artist that works with fog. And I've always used her images to talk about the excitement and the mystery of new technologies when they hit the world. This was an installation at the Hauser Kunst in Munich a few years ago. And, I used another one of her works to illustrate this salon. I know Zach has very briefly touched on the salons, but the MoMA R&D salons are this series that I have held. Now we're at number 55, believe it or not, to show that museums can be the R&D of society. In other words, whenever there's something that hits us, it could be part of everybody's intimate life, or it can be part of the life of a society. We try to present it as a discussion amongst 4 or 5 people. At least one of them is an artist. I make an introduction and we tackle it. It has a special choreography, 7 minutes each, and the audience gets a reading list and then we talk about it. And more than once, we've been talking about AI. This was a rather recent examination of AI, but not only AI, it was also Web3. It was the whole idea of decentralization. It was the new technologies, what they would set off and set out, and what they were enabling. And in the past, these are the salons you see. Sometimes we talk about the idea of good, other times we talk about dogs, about anger, about, one of the recent ones was the age of the bully. But we had talked about AI even before in 2018 with this salon that was called AI Artificial Imperfection, because we were trying already at that time to understand the promise and the threat of AI. And at that time, it was still very embryonic, but already we knew that because AI uses training sets that are the product of our human fallibility, it was also fallible, if not prejudiced, straight out prejudiced. So one of the speakers was Kate Crawford. If you have not heard about her, I doubt it, but if you haven't heard about her yet, you should really seek her out and look at her work, both her theoretical scholarly work and her work as an artist, because it is an attempt to understand the ethical and underpinnings of AI, both in terms of the consumption in the real world and also in terms of the biases and possible ethical pitfalls that are behind it. And she works a lot with Trevor Paglen, who's another great artist. So if you think about salons like this, the idea is to take the opportunity of a museum and the opportunity of speaking with artists, but not only with them. We always have also scientists and scholars, but artists, and the museum as places where we can think about things in a different way, or we can have other points of entry into topics that are crucial to our life. So, from that viewpoint, a discussion on AI as a cultural endeavor is one of the aspects from which AI enters the Museum of Modern Art. But as I was mentioning to you before, AI has been part of the museum's parlance just for a few years, but technology always was there. And it was also technology seen from a very critical viewpoint. So what you're looking at here is a great piece by Jean Tinguely that was set in the Museum of Modern Art in 1960. It was, in his words, a self-constructing and self-destroying work of art. It was like this enormous kinetic sculpture that was composed of bicycle wheels, motors, a player piano, a go-kart, a bathtub, and all of these like found objects. And it was set in motion in March in front of an audience in the sculpture garden. And for a brief operation, like a balloon inflated and bursts, and then it just like self-destroyed. So the whole idea, the whole metaphor was to look at the beauty and the death and thanatos, like the love and eros and thanatos of the machine. And I'm giving you just a few examples just to tell you how the museum and artists also were looking at technology from all sides. Another very important moment was the machine as seen at the end of the mechanical age, an exhibition in 1968 curated by Pontou Sultan. You see on one hand, on the right-hand side, you see the public looking at all these mechanical endeavors and all of these engagements with the machine by artists. And on the left-hand side, you see the catalog, the gorgeous catalog that had a metal cover that was embossed. That's the entrance of the museum, that was embossed, and it was an attempt to talk about the romanticism of the machine made. It was in 1968 and 1969, and it was a collection of comments on technology by artists of the Western world. That's what Pontou Sultan called it. So even in this case, comments by artists on technology. what are artists doing that makes them so special when they are good? They give us a sense of where we could be going. And this is exactly what this series of seminars is about, right? It's about trying to understand where AI could take us if used for good and where we should be more aware. So there are many artists that are engaged in that right now. But then, going on in the history of the museum, this is a beautiful exhibition by my colleague, Kara McCarty. I was not around at that time yet, who did an exhibition about computer chips. And in 1990, computer chips needed to be plotted out for engineers to check that all of the different connections were right. So what you see here are these like big diagrams of microchips that are plotted out so that and they're beautifully colorful. You can't see it in this picture, and some of them are in the collection now. Then acquisitions also, comments on technology by artists from all over the world. I'm showing you this piece, Teji Furuhashi's Lovers, not only because it's fabulous, it's this projection in a square room with this tower of projectors, and you have these like lovers that keep on running and they never meet. They just like cross each other. It's just the most romantic and beautiful and sad thing. And the other sad thing is that we cannot find the right projectors anymore. So that's also an interesting problem that we often have with technology, the fact that it becomes obsolete and then it becomes really hard to keep a particular work going, right? So this is something that artists have given us as a problem forever. If you think of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, it's not different from Teji Furuhashi's Lovers, right? We don't know how to handle its disintegration. And I have a lot of pieces also in the design collection that are in that kind of predicament. Other objects that we acquired, and we're getting closer to the day of today. This is another example, Feng Mengbo Long March Restart from 2008. So I'm jumping ahead a few years. Feng Mengbo was the first Chinese artist that was invited to exhibit a Documenta in 1987. And this particular video game that is a gigantic projection, but you can actually also interact with it. So it's one of the first examples of this idea of interactive art and video games in the museum is actually loosely based on the idea of the Long March, the 2-year military retreat of the Red Army in China between 1933 and 1935 that led to Mao Zedong remaining then in power for many, many years. So what is interesting is that often artists use technology also in order to achieve a social commentary that they might otherwise not be able to be very explicit about. There's always a step ahead in technology that makes it so that it's almost like a rabbit running very fast. From my personal viewpoint, technology has always been very much part of my interest in a natural way. I was trained as an architect, and I always look at any work that is in front of me as a relationship between goals and means. Let's say that as a designer, you declare a certain intention. You want to make tagging. You see on the right of the screen, that was a whole system of laser tagging that actually was connected to Zach's work that we were talking about, iWriter. But there was this system that enabled people to tag buildings using a laser, and then you could cancel completely the tag as if it were a screen where you would cancel what you had written. Even in the case, let's say the declared goal is to make an object like that, and then the issue is how do you get to that particular object? Goals and means, what kind of technology, how much it costs, how accessible it is. All of these different considerations are very important in the evaluation of a design object. Maybe less so in art, but when it comes to design, they are fundamental. So Design in the Elastic Mind was an exhibition that I curated in 2008 that was about science and design coming together without engineering and technology as a filter in between. So it was really an explosion of these two different categories of people that really needed each other. Scientists that were just waiting to be able to work in design because then they would not be subject to the strictures of peer review. And on the other hand, designers that wanted to speculate about possible futures with some kind of ground of science under their feet. So it was really an experiment that made me very happy because even in this case, it was a little bit like opening a back door. And very often the back door has to deal with technology. That's the funny thing. Museums have sometimes a hard time anointing new technologies, and not just museums, but culture at large. And we'll talk about that more later on. This is the exhibition that Zach was talking about. It was 2011. It was called Talk to Me, and it was about the idea that even though we've always had a rapport with objects, a heirloom that is very dear to us or complete indifference towards other objects, after the digital evolution, we've become much more demanding of objects. We want objects to actually have conversations with us. And I don't know if you ever experienced Talking Carl, the little thing there on the left-hand side. That was the most hilarious app at the very beginning of the iPad. There was this like little puppet that would repeat everything that you would say, only with voice. And we would all go crazy. It was just so silly, but so new, the idea of having this conversation and this almost back and forth with a machine. After that, there were several other exhibitions, but I also wanted to mention a few acquisitions into the collection. The idea of acquiring digital objects, so a technology that has been used by artists already for a few years to produce art, but in this particular case, it was not a means to an end, it was the end. If you think of the Google Map Pin, the Google Map Pin exists to change completely our behaviors and really make us count on a narration of how to get somewhere that is like automatic as opposed to leafing through the pages of a book or opening a map, but it exists only in the digital world. Or one of my proudest acquisitions, because it's so absurd and absurdist in a way, is the acquisition of the @sign, which of course cannot be acquired because it's in the public domain, so it's an anointment of sorts. It put into question everything. What is an acquisition? What is a collection? What is an object? Because its history is so interesting. It goes back to the Middle Ages because the monks that used to copy manuscript already used the @sign to actually save energy in writing the Latin preposition ad, right? And then the sign existed through the centuries, used by merchants, used by accountants. And when Ray Tomlinson from BBN, an MIT alum, when he in 1971 was working on the email program as BBN was inventing the internet or giving shape to the internet on DARPA's commission. So he looked at the keyboard. He was looking for a way to actually fuse, to make shorter the code that was in between the name of a person and the position of the person's email inbox in the computer. And so he just adopted the @sign to fuse all this code. So he adopted it exactly in the same way it was adopted by the monks in the Middle Ages. And the first email he sent using the @sign was about the @sign itself. So technology sometimes can erase centuries. Sometimes it can give new meaning and new dimension to objects that have existed forever. Technology is not the means, is not the end, but it can be the means in the hands of a really thoughtful and a really determined creator. So that's really how we want to see it at MoMA. Other acquisitions that speak to our relationship with technology are, for instance, the acquisition of the first set of emojis that was designed by Shigetaka Kurita in 1999 for Docomo, the Japanese communications company. It was designed to make communication between the company and its clients easier. It was designed to let them know whether the weather would be good or bad, and if they needed an umbrella, it would snow. It was designed to let them know there were special offers that they could get from the company. Only in a second moment did it become a communication between the clients, a C2C instead of a B2B, so or a B2C. So it was something that started out in one way, but then was co-opted and has become once again a different dimension of communication. So acquiring digital objects also entails really interesting issues that we will see even more about when we talk about video games. So we started out our collection of video games with about 25. Now we have 37. It's not huge, but it's very thoughtful, right? Very deliberate. Collecting video games was really proof of the fact that there's a prejudice towards technology, at least when it comes to the world of fine arts and the world of culture. It really, we thought about it for years, and we had a work group. We worked out what the criteria should be. We worked out how to acquire, what to acquire. We knew that we wanted the source code if possible. If the source code was not possible, then we would go to an emulation. So we really thought about it very deeply, long and deeply. And we also thought about the idea of design. We acquired them as design, not as art. So the design of the behavior was also very important for us, and the space of the video game. So really, we did a great job, I think. And the reaction were mostly positive, with the exception of a few really, I'm sorry, old farts that really went crazy at the idea that video games would be included in the MoMA collection. There was one critic from a UK magazine that was like almost having fainting at the idea that that Pac-Man would be near Picasso. And I was thinking, well, there's 3 floors in between. And anyway, probably Picasso was also judged that way at his time. But no matter what, we persevered. But one thing that was interesting was how the problem of collecting technology continued pretty much from before. As we said before with Fukuhashi, the fact that the lovers' projectors could not be found anymore. Many problems also happened with Nam June Paik, the great Korean master. Also, in his case, there were many pieces of his technology that could not be retrieved anymore. But also, how do you acquire something that is interactive, still a product, and semi-alive or completely alive, as is the case with massive multiplayer online games? So we established protocols for all of these different games. You're looking at Tetris. In that case, the protocol was one of the original designers, Alexei Pajitnov, emulating the game for us on a flat screen, but also giving us the sensor of a CRT screen. So it's a perfect fake, but it's original because it's done by the original designer. In other cases, we would have not the source code because the Atari wouldn't give you the source code for Pac-Man, but a very good emulation. Or in the case of EVE Online, since it's alive, we would have a day in the life of EVE Online shot as a video by its users. And in all cases, we had to also involve our lawyers, which is super interesting. They actually had a really good time because we needed to change the end user license agreement. That is the thing that we all agree to whenever we have a piece of software, and we give up our souls very often. But in that particular case, you might not know, but the production company can revoke the agreement at any moment, most times when you sign. And instead, we had to change that particular piece because we couldn't allow an object in the MoMA collection to be revoked at any point. So I'm giving you a lot of details, but just to let you understand the universe of details and of different behaviors on the part of the curator, on the part of the conservator, on the part of the audience, on the part of the artists that come into play when we deal with new technologies. And in particular at MoMA, AI is used in many different ways. Well, it's used, let's first be done with the functional use within the museum. So I'm showing you here the very first website for MoMA from 1995. It's very, very sweet, and it was coded by yours truly. I learned HTML and I made it because nobody really knew what a website was, and I wanted to have a website. And so they told me, okay, here's $300, do it. And so I used them to buy dinners for the student from the PhD students from the SVA that taught me HTML. And here is the kind of website that you can still look for if you want at MoMA. But now talking about the idea of AI at MoMA, so 30 years later, how do we use this particular technology? Because in those 30 years, we've been using all the different technologies that came up, new forms of HTML. We've been using Flash. Unfortunately, we have some gorgeous websites that are in Flash. So we have been using all the software that we could use. And now here we are at AI. How do we use AI at MoMA beyond the collection and the exhibitions? So first of all, we use it for content, right? For speaker series, articles, and videos. Sometimes we use AI to organize it, right? So sometimes it's the back end or the organizational part of some of the programs that we need to set in place. We use it sometimes to support new art and research, analysis, and experimentation. We don't have any rule that says do not use AI for labels, but we don't use it. I mean, even though it's not a rule, we don't do it because I'm sure that also you can recognize AI in a second at this point. I mean, there are some sophisticated programs perhaps, but they're not sophisticated enough. We use it for interactive programming whenever we need to like set a different dedication of CPU space to different programs. We use it for some collection databases and for the database of the library and the database also of all the photography of the past MoMA exhibition. We use it for security on site systems. We use it for cybersecurity and fraud prevention, and we use it for social media monitoring. We are dreaming of using it also to supplement the cataloging system and also to do some backtracking of cataloging. So, in other words, we use it amply. And we have been using it for quite a few years. So it's only recently that the explosion of AI available, I don't like the word consumers, but AI available to all has brought this particular technology in front of everybody and has created a lot of discussion. But AI in different forms has been existing for quite a long time. And we have been pretty up to date with technology, so we've been using it. And of course, then there is the collection and there is the exhibitions. I think that probably one of the most famous AI installations of the past few years was Refik Anadol's Unsupervised that was at MoMA between 2021 and 2023. So we have Michelle Kuo, who's the other curator that worked with me on this, and I had known Refik already for quite a long time. A little bit because it's part of our UCLA gang. I mean, my UCLA gang, Casey Rias, who's a wonderful artist and educator that actually was from at the MIT Media Lab. He's one of the authors of Processing. He migrated there and created this school of media arts that is really has flourished tremendously. And Refik moved from Turkey to UCLA just to work with him. So Refik has always been really passionate about databases, and he worked with us with the database of the MoMA collection that was already online. The metadata was already online since 2016, so since early on. He decided to use artificial intelligence to interpret and transform more than 200 years of art at MoMA. So he really tried to have this particular artwork that was moving in real time. You know, it was actually connected to two big NVIDIA computers, so it was an AI that was working in real time. And he tried to create this meditation on technology, creativity, and modern art. So what he did, he trained a sophisticated machine learning model that was, his proprietary model to interpret this publicly available data of MoMA's collection. And it's almost as if this learning model walks through the conception of a vast range of works and reimagines the connections amongst them. So many people have asked, but are you showing the actual works? No, it's never the actual work, even though it might seem like it is. It's the latent space. It's what's in between. It's the AI imagining how the connections amongst works might be. And this was also an opportunity for us. Let me just bring down the volume. Yeah, bring down the volume. So you're seeing the AI in action here, right? So continually evolving, giving you these ghosts of some images. It had three different movements, right? So there's the there's the GAN movement that is very clear. Then there's the moment in which, Refik has this kind of lava lamp motion that is his signature. He uses it for all of his works of art, even though they're different databases. And then there was another one that showed this looks at all the different spaces in between, and the other one instead is more fluid. But here are some of and this is like the data universe. We tried also to explain to the public what AI is by means of showing this particular exhibition. It was not easy because it is a hard concept to tackle for many, not for those who are already used to video games and to the idea of AI, but for many others, it was difficult to understand that this AI had 117 dimensions, that it was at any time testing all these different points. So by having this data universe, it was an attempt to show them the dimensionality of this particular learning model. And also, in the same screen, every now and then, we would have a screen that would come up and would like show the kind of keywords that the AI was using in that particular moment, the kind of colors or patterns that it was looking for. So we tried to give both an emotional and a more narrative view of what an AI can do. Not that it was completely successful in this kind of explanation, because it's going to take time, but the work of art was mesmerizing. Usually people stay in front of works of art about 10 to 20 seconds at the Museum of Modern Art. They would stay in front of this for 20 minutes. And even even the two of us, Michelle and I, would sometimes just sit in front of it, mesmerized. Not only was it really like a psychological psychologically soothing piece, but also it gave us new inroads into the collection that we hadn't thought about before. This is what was on the collection, what was available on GitHub since 2016. We had all these different records. People ask, what do you mean by metadata? Well, we mean that we have all the kind of information that is available in our system about a work of art. Yes, the picture too, but the picture is not what gets necessarily reproduced. It's also the conservation notes, it's also sketches, it's also letters that are coming between the curator and the artist. So it's like a mixed bag of data that the AI picks and chooses from. And this is the three-dimensional data universe seen from closer by. So we were trying to really explain what data narratives were. And these images that you see here are data visualizations. I mean, we've been all interested in visualization design. Well, this is what it is, a data visualization that sometimes looks a little bit like a figurative paintings, and other times it's completely abstract. This was another moment in the life of that AI that always surprised Michelle and I, because it was like perfect red. It's such an important thing in the history of modern art. Even before AI, there were artists that kind of like prefigured the idea of AI. So Sandra Perry, for instance, this is an installation that I truly love from 2013. It's two performers that whip their bodies around and look like they are really being possessed by an advanced technology, while in reality, Perry was achieving this effect by repurposing Photoshop tools that attempt to automatically fill in or erase parts of an image using artificial intelligence, right? So in a way, she was trying to mimic artificial intelligence before it was available to all. This is from 2013. Or also Yan Cheng and his emissaries. Yan Cheng is based here in New York, and the emissaries was a trilogy of simulations about cognitive evolution, past and future, and the ecological conditions that shape it. So it's composed of three interconnected simulations. You see one here, and each is centered on the life of an emissary who is caught between unraveling old realities and emerging weird ones. It's a narration that takes place thousands of years in the future, and the volcano that is at the basis of this whole environment is managed by an AI. So there's a casuality and a happenstance to what happens in this universe that is in contrast instead with the behavior that is determined by the artist. So there's a lot of this work, and here you can see the installation in this great exhibition that Michelle curated in 2019 that was called Art and Technology in the 21st Century New Order. On the other hand, some artists also look at AI in a very critical way and try to use their art to make us aware of possible pitfalls. Trevor Paglen is one of the most well-known ones, and this is one of his first well-known analysis of AI. He's been working on different facets of technology for decades, but in this particular case, he found the training sets that were used for many learning models, and most of them came from from people in the military, and kind of showed them in this installation. You can see how the different parts of the body are checked by the AI and then established as possible patterns. And through his work, Trevor also showed how this abstraction of the pattern also goes to reinforce biases. You might remember terrifying stories about mistaken identities between animals and human beings and the reinforcement of a bias against Black and brown people. So it was really like a lot that went into these training sets that had to be rethought, not to mention the whole idea of privacy. And another, Kate Crawford, as I mentioned to you before, worked a lot also with Trevor Paglen on training sets. But this is one of the works that we have acquired in the collection. It's from 2018. And it's called Anatomy of an AI System. In this work that looks at AI like Trevor's work from a critical angle, Kate, together with Vladan Joler, visualizes everything that is behind an Amazon Echo from 2018. So all the systems of extraction of data, of materials, and of labor that are behind an Amazon Echo. For those who think that an AI is disembodied and doesn't consume, in reality, there are people, there are minds, there are privacy mining. There's so much behind it that would otherwise remain hidden. And you know, this is the beauty of visualization design. It's there very often to make the unknown and the hidden visible to everyone. So Trevor also has this new installation that we just, even though the work is a little bit from some time ago, Behold These Glorious Times, it explores how AI systems learn to see and make sense of the world. So the first one was about the training sets, and the second one is about how the mechanism actually works. And it's created with hundreds of thousands of images from AI training data sets. And the installation reveals the transition between these images and the abstract machine readable format. So it's one step beyond in letting us see how a machine learns and what the pitfalls could be. So this is really what artists do. They use a technology, they critique a technology, they let us understand how a technology can be used well or unwell, right? And it's so important that they're able to have this communication with us. American artists, just to end this series of artists that are in the Museum of Modern Arts, American artists with this work, My Blue Window, creates a multimedia installation in which he explores the anti-Blackness bias, right? So it's about the predictive policing technologies, the Minority Report kind of predictive AI tools that dispatch officers to high crime zones before incidents are even reported. So these are already reality, and American Artist, that's their name, actually tries to show how this AI could work, how this AI could determine that there's a situation of danger, and how all of this predetermination is based on pre-existing bias. So you see, it really is another image of it, the forecasting. It's about us really understanding what is going on. And I moved from that to instead show you some examples of good AI in design. These are examples that are not yet in the MoMA collection, but they might be. So what's a good use of AI in a design work? This is Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg's Pollinator Pathmaker Eden Project Edition. She actually realized this piece in Cornwall. It is a pollinator garden. So it's a garden that is planted to optimize the life of pollinator insects, of bees and other, and other pollinators. So different flowers bloom at different times and are set in such a way as to make things not necessarily easy, but optimal for insects. That's a beautiful way, a beautiful application of AI. But maybe one of my favorite is this synthetic memories by a group of designers that are based in Barcelona. They decided to use AI to recreate videos of memory that were never captured to begin with, neither by a photograph nor by a video. And they opened an office to do so in Barcelona, and so that people can actually go and give them their memories and they can reconstruct them. So you see the office is here. Generally, it's elderly people that go and see them, and many of them are people that lived during the Franco years, during the repressive years of the Franco regime. So the memories that they communicate are sometimes really harrowing, and even though they can never be trusted as real or true, we don't even know what real or true is anymore, frankly. So these might be more true than other memories or other facts that have been constructed elsewhere. So you see, this is what happens after the interviews. The people sit there, give all as much as many details as possible, as if it were an identikit, as if it were a police artist reconstructing the face of a suspect, right? So, and then they become these narratives that can be either shared or not, depending on what the subject decides. So I remember my grandfather's hug when he came home from work, or I remember a wooden train heading towards a new home. These are just beautiful pieces. What is art at this point? Is it poetry? Is it the imagination? Or if you look at this, and I'm going to show it in a second, this is the story of a little girl that remembers her mother renting every Saturday a balcony in a person's home because the balcony gave onto the prison yard where the father had been imprisoned by Franco. So that's what they would do. They would go every Saturday on this balcony and greet the father that was in the prison. And this is the memory that these people, this woman reconstructed, this woman who's now in her 90s. It is so beautiful to see what AI can do, and really the sky's the limit. But it's also important to have a real sense of also what could go wrong. Let me stop sharing. And artists, here I go, here I am. And artists help us understand how a new technology can become a tool for creativity and a tool for a better life, or how it could go wrong. And what I think is really important for us all is to talk to our audiences and to our fellow humans as much as possible in order to have a sense of what the possible futures are and go in the direction of the ones that are preferable, not only for us as a human species, but also for other species and the rest of the planet. And voila. And now I'm open for your questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
just want to give a round of applause for Paola. That was an
Thank
amazing
you.
talk. Super
Thank you.
lovely. Um, so I will ask a few questions, and then for folks in the audience, feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to bring them up. I see a lot
Thank
of
you.
really nice. I see some clapping
Thank you.
and some
Thank
really
you.
nice feedback. Okay, so I was really touched in your talk. You showed the first website from the MoMA that you created and brought me way back. And I was thinking, okay, now we wouldn't think anything of using HTML or creating a website to, convey something about what's being exhibited or some event at the MoMA. In the future, so let's say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, how do you imagine, we meet at the MoMA, what forms of AI or how, like, cultural practice that's informed by AI, like what do you hope to see, as part of the conversation. Also, what do you fear? Um, yeah.
Well, what I fear, you can imagine, I don't fear anything in the art world or in the museum per se. I fear the use of our data that is being right now, dangled in front of our eyes. I
Mm,
really fear that. That's
yeah.
what I fear. So I don't fear artists. I fear corporations and I fear governments. I
Mm,
mean, I fear the evil people. But no, when it comes to art, I believe I'm also looking at a question that is in the side panel that asks me, would you ever acquire work done entirely by an AI? Yeah, why not? It really goes to the core of what art is, right? Um, Once upon a time, art used to be the ability to paint in a wonderful way, realistic way. Was also art was communication design,
mm,
right? So it had to have certain qualities and expressiveness, and then it had to go beyond preciousness and ability. So that has changed so much in the 20th century, and even more at the end of the 20th century, and now with digital technology. So what do we know? It might be that we might really have a neural implant and an AI could manifest what we're thinking in a way that is
mm,
almost better than we are. So, I mean,
mm.
sky's really the limit. And that's why sci-fi is so interesting. It sometimes very often imagines what could happen. So I don't have any prejudice towards that. What I want is just stronger citizens. I want stronger citizens that can push back on technologies that they don't want, that can understand when an artist, whether they are using AI or not, really is doing something that advances the world. I just want everybody to be more critical. But
Yeah.
besides that, um, there are many different, I mean, I would love for us all to have a workshop and start really talking. I was hoping that Web3 would really help the intellectual labor be
Mm,
considered more and be remunerated better. There are all these different things. I'm hoping that if technology becomes more available and more efficient for everyone, that the intellectual and creative mind will become more important. That's what I
mm.
always hope for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For intellectual labor to be valued as much as it should be valued in society.
Nice.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Well, I didn't really answer the question
no,
because I
no,
really
no,
don't know, but
it was
that's.
really, no, it was really great.
Mhm.
What have the salons taught you about, um, yeah, the role of the museum and I really love this term R&D.
Mhm.
I would wonder if you could talk more about that and just what have the salons taught you about asking difficult questions or having difficult conversations? Yeah.
Well, the first thing that I learned is that people love to have difficult conversations, especially if they come from very different sides, right? So, the next week there's going to be a salon about witches, and the prompt from the salon about witches, to tell you the truth, comes from the fact that I see such a regression in women's rights
Mm,
that clearly there is so much fear for any kind of feminine valence in
mm,
society that it makes me think of those times where there were witch hunts. But then on the other hand, my R&D associate also has been really excited about the idea of doing a witches salon for months because she also likes the popular culture side
Mm,
of witchcraft, right? So we're putting together this popular side with instead a very serious political discussion, and that also talks about, the problem with trans rights and women's
mm,
rights. So by having this whole mixture, you can have really serious conversations. I remember years ago, before the pandemic, I had a salon that really was tough, but then it went really well. It was about white male.
mm,
So, this whole sense of white males being always in charge and other people not having enough, or maybe white males were discriminated against. So it was really fascinating. And we had great conversations. So the salons have taught me, number one, that if you prepare well, have good people, and organize a good conversation, people will come and they will love it. Number two, it taught me that I don't know enough people that have opinions really different from mine. That's
mm,
always been really challenging, right?
mhm.
Number three, it taught me that artists are very insecure because usually they're the ones that have the hardest time saying yes. And then
Mhm.
and then it has taught me, I mean, sometimes you need to have thicker skin. I have to say they usually we're number 55. So next week's it's number 55.
Yeah.
And there are not too many, but there's been some that were really tough that did not
Mm,
go well. At least they didn't go well for me. And they just like they pierced my skin. But
mm.
yeah, you also have to learn how to take real fire. Mm-mm,
Yeah.
mm-mm.
Interesting. Um, okay, question. What do you think? I'm sorry, I'm reading this from the sidebar.
Yeah,
What do
I
you
see.
think about the abundance of art that is being produced now with AI? For many artists, this is AI, right? Has become a slur. Making art has become very easy with AI, and there's a certain negative connotation to the constant production that is possible, an assumption of deflated values as a result of this. With Refik Anadol's work, you mentioned it was constantly producing new art. How do you think about this change?
So thank you for the question because I've been at this for a long time and I've seen this before. Whenever there's a new technology, there's this moment of drunkenness in which people just like throw everything at the wall and see
Hmm.
what sticks. And, you see some absolute crap and you see some joyous crap and you see sometimes some beautiful examples. And some things become addictive. And then after a while, sobriety, like people just like have the hangover and then they calm down. And so you set the baselines that are both aesthetic and quality, value, ethic, no, everything. The baseline is so then you can build from that. We're still in the moment of drunkenness, but there are some examples that I love. For instance, I'm completely addicted to the AI construction of children's drawings. When you have,
Mm,
oh my God, when you have like, the shark with like the fangs, oh, those I can never get enough of. And, I mean, I don't know if that's ever going to go into a museum, but it
yeah,
is fun. I mean, in a way, we're all testing the tools, just like we were doing with the flying toasters.
yeah.
And maybe there will be a moment in 20, 30 years of nostalgia for the crap that we're producing today, just like we're having nostalgia
Mm,
for the toasters. So it's all good. It's all, at least this kind of art is all good. There are other types that are maybe more complicated, some deep fakes and
mm,
that are used for nefarious ideas. But the kind of art that we're talking about right now, even if it might not have the quality standards that we seek
mm,
from high art, it's something that we need to go through.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
Nice. I guess since we're an educational institution, do you have any advice for students about, you know, I think a lot of students are um, I've noticed at the lab they're really fearless, and I've loved this idea of drunkenness. I never thought about saying it that way, but that is something that I see They seem to be very fearless in terms of experimentation. Do you have any advice for students, especially about kind of putting their ideas out into the world and, and kind of taking their work and their research, especially if they're working in art and design, anything that you've seen. I think you've seen a lot of students develop a professional practice, develop a body of work. Any kind of thoughts about kind of being a student at this time?
Well, I'd say remember that it's a tool. Remember that
Yeah.
AI is a tool. So a tool is never sophisticated. You're sophisticated.
Yeah.
So remember that people can recognize AI. They can recognize it from text and anyway, it's for you to make something. It's not for you to just use for the sake of it.
Mm,
So I am encouraging always everybody to use AI, and I'm
mm,
encouraging people to chisel whatever they've done
mm.
afterwards to make sure that it's correct because the hallucinations are like
Yeah.
sometimes so they're so how do I say effronted? How do you say? They're so shameless, right? There are these hallucinations like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is how it is. I'm like, what are you talking about? So
Yeah.
it's always a tool, never the end. And
Hmm.
and develop your own thoughts before,
Yeah.
in whichever medium you need them to be.
Nice. All right. I said two questions come in. I want to ask, I know we're sort of hitting time right now, so I want to just ask them quickly. And then maybe the last thing I will ask you, so I'm going to ask you these two questions. And then I would just say the last question I will say, is there anything that you've seen recently that really touched you? A book, a movie, an exhibition, an artwork, something that kind of just, yeah, sorry.
Well, I told you about the synthetic dreams, but then last
Yeah.
night I was at a memorial for Rick
Yeah.
Scofidio, who's this great architect that did the shed and also did the High Line, right? And for the people in the t and the memorial was at the High Line, and
Hmm.
there was as part of the memorial they reconstituted a little piece of this of one of the probably the most beautiful piece of theater that I've seen in my life, which was the Mile Long Opera. That was a few years ago, but it was this series of singers that were on the High Line from 14th Street all the way to the Shed and beyond that were singing one opera. And as the public, you were supposed to walk through them and you would get the opera that way. And it was all sorts of choirs of citizens from all of New York. There was, some were singing in English, some were singing
Hmm.
in Spanish. I mean, it was just one of the most beautiful and moving
Hmm.
things ever. So that
Hmm.
reminded me. Mm.
Wow.
That's when you
Nice.
use technology, because
Mm.
even in that case, they had to be coordinated. So when you
Yeah.
use technology to make us more human than before.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Sounds
Mm.
really touching.
Yeah.
Okay, there are a few kind of actually, yeah, some really interesting questions came in, and then we'll make sure that you get all of these questions. So,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, in terms of more critical citizens, what are some of your approaches? I also just love that phrase, critical citizen, and I
Yeah.
just want to celebrate that for a second.
My approach is to stimulate skepticism. I'm just naturally skeptical. Maybe I'm one of those people that is pessimistic and skeptical so as to be pleasantly surprised, but I think that's a very healthy attitude. So I always incite people to think twice about what I'm saying, maybe. And
Hmm.
it's not that I want disagreement. I always get hurt, I'm very sensitive. But, I just want people to think with their own head if they can. And it's becoming so difficult because I told you, I have a hard time finding people from the right, from the
Mm.
radical right, that can have a conversation with me. So
Mm.
I am a sinner to begin with. But
Mhm.
the question is also to you, Zach.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Oh yeah, to me, I mean, in terms of critical citizens, I would have to think about that phrase. I just love that phrase. I'd have to think a bit more deeply. The thing that I try to push, especially in terms of thinking about AI and technology, you know, I always at the Media Lab, I always talk about this idea of a demo versus a poem. A
Mm.
demo, we have the phrase demo or die at the lab. We're always like making demonstrations of the work that we do. But a demo is like I always think of a demo as a kind of demonstration of technology. You're saying like, oh, it's a demo of machine learning, a demo of AI, a demo of VR, a demo of AR. But a poem is speaking to what it means to be human and what it means to be alive. And when you're working with technology, but you're making poetry, I think the technology is in service of the artwork, rather than the artwork being in service of the technology. And I think that is really important for criticality, for making speculative work, for making work that is, um, you know, going to be able to poke and prod at these things, which are really important and hard to understand.
Well, Zach was
Yeah.
one of the founders of the School for Poetic Computation. Does it
Mhm.
still exist?
It still exists. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
fabulous. Mm-mm.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so there's a question that I just noticed in the QA section,
hmm
not in the sidebar.
hmm
I'd love to ask why all this rich artistic, speculative, critical work seems to sit adjacent, but not inside the actual trajectory of technology. Yeah.
Well, that's a good question that has to do more with what companies are now. There used to be these labs,
Mhm.
forget Bell Labs, but yeah, don't forget Bell Labs with with experiments in art and technology.
Mhm.
There used to be Xerox PARC, the Palo
Mhm.
Alto Research Center. I mean, it used to be that corporations believed in art. It was not just a lapel pin. It
Mhm.
was really, really serious. Maybe Google still has a little bit of the art and
Mhm.
technology, and it still employs some of our great friends that are truly great minds.
Mhm.
So there is a little bit of that. But otherwise, I feel that this particular generations of technological corporations does not feel any need for art. They think
Mhm.
engineering and marketing and that kind of like social planning is enough. Maybe I'm wrong. I want to give it more thought because
Mhm.
it's a very interesting question. And I don't want to just generalize flatly. I want to think of Korea. I want to think of other,
Mhm.
but definitely the big ones, like
Yeah.
Xerox and Bell used to
Mhm.
be. mm,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think they're doing it that much, right, Zach?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree.
Mm.
Um, Great. Any final words of advice or thoughts for the folks? And thank you everybody for participating, for
Yeah,
joining from all the way from Australia and Canada and
yeah.
uh everywhere.
No, I'm
And
very honored. I'm very honored. I'm delighted to be here with you, Zach, and very honored to be able to speak to everybody. No, I would rather ask you all if you have any compliments to what I said today or anything, like all these questions that you asked about the companies, etc. I would love to get that from you. You have my message. It's just have a very strong mind and a very strong spine and know what you want out of your technology, and you'll be fine. But if you have any feedback from me, I would really welcome it.
Wonderful. So I think I echo everybody here and just saying thank you, a huge, huge thank you for speaking to us, for the work that you do, and
Thank you.
just a thoughtful conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Ciao, Patty. Ciao, Pat. Bye. And Yasi and everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.